I have given this talk in a number of different venues over the years. This is something I'd love to do, to talk to young people, to talk to college students, and to help them make sense of what they're doing. So my purpose in volunteering to give this talk tonight was to help you make the most of your college experience. What I have found over the years mentoring and teaching students is sometimes they just go to college because that's what they're supposed to do. That's what people expect them to do. And there's not a whole lot of asking the question, why am I here? What am I doing here? What's this all going to mean? And I think that's a missed opportunity. I think over the next 4 years, if you're first-year students, or the next semester, if you're last-year students, is asking those fundamental questions. Why am I here? What am I doing? Where am I going? And hopefully you'll be able to make sense of what's happening and have better outcomes. And again, I hope you have beautiful lives, meaningful lives, and productive lives after Barry. So you learned a little bit about who I am. I just want to get a sense of who's in the room by a show of hands. You don't have to talk. Who here are first-year students? All right. Second years? Third years? Seniors? Okay, we got a good mix. I think some people voted more than once, but that's okay. I lived in Florida for 18 years. We did those kinds of things. So you might be here for a CE credit. Raise your hand if you're here for CE credit. Nothing, no shame. That's all right. I think Barry has a wonderful program, right, in incentivizing you to learn a little bit more after dark, and that's okay. Some of you might be here because you're in that moment of exploration. You might not know what you want to do with your college, with your 4 years in college, what you want to major in, what do you want to do with your life afterwards. Some of you may be here because you have a major, but you might have second thoughts or doubts, or as the title of the talk indicates, maybe you're looking for something beyond your major, because there's more to life and there's more to college than just the major. So let me give you a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to do tonight. I want to ask the question, right, do majors matter, right? Do they matter? I want to talk about the other 2/3 of the pie. So thinking about your college education as a pie divided in 3 parts. First part is your major. 2/3 of your college education will not be your major. For me, that's the difference maker. What are you going to do with that other 2/3? I want to talk a little bit about foundations. General education is something that I have found over the years that students love or loathe. And I think we don't do a good enough job in explaining why we ask you to do a general education program. So I want to talk about that, why foundations matters. And then finally, I want to give you some thoughts about life beyond the major and how to maximize your 27,000-acre experience here at Barry. So that's our roadmap for tonight. So let me start by doing some major myth busting. And some of the data and information I'm going to share with you might freak you out. It might freak out your parents. And it might make you question, what have I been doing for the last 4 years? You know, in the case of some of our seniors. But I want to tell you this is okay. This is all okay. So 80% of students nationally change their major at least once. So many of you walked into the doors of Barry during SOAR. You had a major in mind. 80% of you will have changed your mind. And that's okay. And that's okay. On average, college students change their major at least 3 times. So changing once, sure. Changing twice, that's okay. Changing 3 times, I get a little bit worried that we're going to get you out of here in 4 years. But I think that shows, right, how students between the ages of 18 and 22, y'all are dynamic and changing. Your interests are going to change. Your tastes are going to change. You're going to take a class in something that you didn't think you liked. You're going to fall in love with it. And you're going to change direction. And that's okay. And that's part of growing. And that's why you're here. This number I share a lot with parents and prospective students. And again, they kind of gasp when they hear that 30% of college graduates work in a field unrelated to their major. I'm sorry, 30% of college grads work in a field related to their major, which means 70% of college graduates are working in something unrelated to what they spent 4 years studying. So I share this information not to scare you or to minimize the importance of a major, but to lessen the panic and the anxiety about getting it right. Because I've found over the years students freak out. They're like, I have to pick the right major because what I'm going to major in is what I'm going to be doing when I'm 45. So I want to tell you 70% of you will not be doing anything related to your major when you're my age. And that's okay, right? Your first job out of college is going to be a landing spot and a launch pad to 1,000 different directions. So I'll share a little bit about my story, right? So I graduated from college in the mid-90s. Cell phones, the only people who had cell phones were drug dealers. And they were like, they were this big and they were like heavy as a brick. Data analytics, what was that? That didn't exist. E-commerce didn't exist. Bitcoin, nobody had thought of it yet. Internet, Facebook, none of these things existed. Right? So you would think that in 1996 when I graduated, I was ill-prepared for the life of 2023. What I studied in college actually has helped me prepare for this kind of unforeseen world. And I'll talk a little bit about how your college education, your general education, and your major and everything you do in college is going to get you prepared for the next 20-some years of your life that are going to look very different from today. And finally, I want to use this catchphrase that a good colleague of mine used to always say to students, that a major is only one line on your resume. It's just one line. There's so much more to you than one line on your resume. And so when you go out into the working world, you're going to have a major. Most people who graduate from college, everyone has a major, right? But what else do you have on your resume? What else have you done? What other experiences and skills do you bring to the table beyond just a major? It's only one part of your story. So, majors do not equal career, okay? That's the only math you're going to get in this talk. I'm a Spanish major. I didn't do math. Excuse me. But majors do not necessarily lead to a specific career. So take, for example, Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, you want to be a mogul in tech? Major in psychology. He didn't major in computer science. He didn't major in computer science. He majored in psychology. Do you want to be the CEO of Chipotle and be a captain of industry? Major in art history. Do you want to write amazing novels like Harry Potter? Major in French literature. How about YouTube? The CEO of YouTube, again, English and literature as a major, not tech. So the point I want to make with this is that the major that you declare, the major that you decide is not locking you into 1,000 different, it's not locking you into a career that's limiting you. The major that you embark upon is going to set you up for multiple possibilities. And I'm not just making this up. Employers are looking for a lot of different qualities and skills. Communication, innovation, teamwork, leadership. They're looking at your GPA, sure, but they're also looking at your interpersonal skills, your flexibility, your adaptability, your technical skills, your honesty, your integrity, your problem-solving skills, your analytical skills. So let me ask you, is there a major? Can you major in that? Right? This is what employers want, but you can see it's not a major. It's a collection of skills and attributes that you're going to develop in college regardless of what you major in. Here's some more lists, right? 10 skills that employers say they seek in order of importance. Again, teamwork, decision-making, problem-solving, planning, organizing, ability to communicate. Can you process information? Can you analyze data? Do you have technical knowledge? Do you have proficiency with computers? Can you create and write well? And can you sell and influence others? Again, is there a major or are there a series of majors that do this? And I will argue that you go to the Berry College catalog, you open it up, you look at any of our majors, and that coupled with experiences throughout your education will give you those things on the list that employers are looking for. So again, I'm trying to lower the stress of what majors mean, but also encourage you to examine the full 2/3, the full 3/3 of your education pie beyond the major. All right, last slide about this. So here are other studies. And I'm going to focus a little bit more about liberal arts throughout this talk. I think liberal arts gets a bad rep on the street. People in the media say, oh, liberal arts majors, you're going to learn to be a barista at Starbucks. Back home in Philadelphia, we say bull on that, right? So salaries, right? The average salary coming out for a liberal arts major is $48,600, but that's the first job, right? People have a notion that STEM majors, science majors, technical majors they're going to outperform those liberal arts kids all the time. No. When you get to my age, you'll be outperforming your colleagues in STEM, right? So those in liberal arts in their mid-career will be making an average of 93.5, right? So thinking back to that slide of those amazing and important people, right, who are in positions of influence and leadership in industry, in business, not necessarily business majors. People who are CEOs of STEM corporations, of tech corporations, not necessarily majoring in STEM, right? So these liberal arts fields, these liberal arts majors can indeed prepare you for all sorts of successes after graduation. Okay, so going back to majors, a little bit of advice. I'm going to give some old man, or not so old man, but some older man advice about majors and how this is going to help you in the future, right? So when you're picking a major, my #1 advice to students is to major in love. Major in something you love. Why? Because when it's 2 a.m. and you have a paper due and you're in the library, and if you don't love what you're doing, you will find 95 reasons to go to bed and not finish that paper. But if you love what you're writing, if you love what you're researching, if you love the project that you're working on, you're going to finish it. You're going to do it well, and you're going to be successful academically. I used to always tell students also that picking a major is kind of like picking a life partner. You better make sure you like it, because you're going to be stuck with it for a long time, right? Don't major in something you don't like, because the grades are not going to follow. You're not going to like what you're doing. You're not going to turn in your papers on time. You're going to procrastinate because you don't like it. Your mom might love that major, but if you don't, you're not going to be good at it. So make sure to find what is it that sets a fire in your heart in terms of your major. That's what you should be majoring in. I encourage all students to think beyond that first job. Again, breaking the myth that major equals job, major equals career. That first job is going to be a first job, but it's not going to be your last job. If anything we know about how the economy works, the job that you have when you graduate might not even be around by the time you're in your mid-40s. The job that you really want when you're in your mid-40s might not exist when you graduate from college, right? So take the stress off yourselves about what's that job, the first job coming out of college, because so you're only going to be there for a couple of years. You're going to go on to many other things, and that's where the secret sauce is. I'll talk a little about pairings, right? So some folks who love wine, they love to pair their wine with a certain kind of cheese or a certain kind of food. Think about pairing your major with other types of experiences. Maybe it's a second major, maybe it's a minor, maybe it's something that's complementary, or maybe it's something that has nothing to do with your major. Let me tell you a little story, because over the years I've found that students don't remember my lectures, they remember the funny stories I would tell, or not so funny stories. So many years ago, there was a student that I was working with at my former institution, and he was a business major, and he went to one of those business fairs that they have on campus, right, where employers come to campus, you share your resumes, maybe you get an interview out of it. It's a networking event, and it's a way to kind of find a job. So those job fairs, right? And he goes to a job fair over at the University of Central Florida, which is population 70,000 students, which is down the street from where I used to teach. And you know, there's tons of employers, but there's tons of students there, right? Because it's 70,000 students to go to school at UCF. And he left his application off with a private equity firm, and he saw the stack of papers that were on the desk. He said, oh boy, what are my chances of getting a job here? Everyone's leaving the resume with this corporation. Lo and behold, the next day he gets a call back. They say, we want to have an interview with you. And he's like, do you mind if I ask why? I mean, you had so many candidates. What was it about me that makes me interesting to you? They said, yeah, everyone in the pile had a business major, but you had a philosophy minor. We want to hear about that. That's really interesting. Tell us more about that. So his interview, when he had the interview, was less about business and more about his philosophy minor. Potentially, on the surface, unrelated to his major, but it was something that he loved learning, and it was something that he was very good at talking about with his potential employer, and guess what? He landed the job, right? So those of you who are asking, what can I do with a philosophy major or minor? You can work for a private equity firm, right? It's going to get you that interview. Shout out to my philosophy professors in the audience. Yes, that's for you. So think about pairing, right? Think about not just a major, but a major plus something else, right? And then finally, a guiding question that maybe you should have in mind is, what kind of experiences do you want to have in college? And what majors offer those kinds of experiences? Is it working in a lab? Is it reading books? Is it analyzing text? Is it working in the community? Is it nursing, right? What kind of experience do you want? And that's the kind of major that's going to make the most sense for you. So I mentioned earlier the pie, right? Divide your college education into 3 parts. The major, in terms of credits, is only going to be 1/3 of your experience. What's that other 2/3 going to look like? What are you going to fill those other 2 pieces of the pie with? They're going to be electives and they're going to be foundations. Those are the other 2 pieces of your education. So major, foundations, and electives. So let's focus on that other 2/3 of your experience. My favorite superhero, Batman. Right? Batman's bad. Batman's a tough dude. Batman doesn't really have any superpowers. He's just tough, but he's got a lot of gadgets. He's got a lot of weapons. He's got a lot of things in his tool belt, right? Why does he have so much stuff in his belt? That's a lot to carry around, right? I know he's muscular and strong, but he's going to be weighted down by this belt. What's in there, and why is he carrying so much stuff? It's because Batman doesn't know what kind of criminal he's going to come up against in the mean streets of Gotham tomorrow. He doesn't know what his foe is going to be, what his foe is going to be carrying, what his foe is going to, do to hurt him or to hurt his city. He doesn't know their superpowers, so he's got to be prepared for anything. Your college education is like getting a Batman tool belt full of all sorts of tricks and tools and ways of knowing, because you don't know what life is going to look like in 2043. So you better have a Batman belt ready for any kind of unforeseen circumstances. I heard the 80s are back, right? Anybody who's fans of the 80s, raise your hand if you know who this guy is. That's right, Mr. T. I pity the fool who doesn't know who Mr. T is. So you don't know who Mr. T is, go ask your parents. They'll tell you all about the A-Team and Rocky III and Clubber Lang. But this guy is Mr. T. But anyway, I'm making a joke about being a T-shaped person. So Dean Hunsaker, if you've been in a class with him or a talk with him, has probably told you all about being T-shaped. If you haven't had the chance, I'll tell you a little bit about what being T-shaped means. So there's some great research that comes out of Michigan State University that digs into the question of who are the best equipped employees in leadership positions. What do they look like? What kinds of attributes do they have? What kinds of characteristics do they share? What do the best of the best look like? And the folks at Michigan State interviewed thousands of captains of industry, CEOs, head honchos, important people, and they asked this question: who are your best employees and what do they look like? And the results of the research was this: the best and the most successful and the most fulfilled people were T-shaped. They had deep knowledge in their technical fields. They had depth of knowledge. But everyone has depth of knowledge when you get to a certain level in your job. Everyone has that. But what set these people apart was the horizontal axis of that T, that breadth of experience, that having multiple ways of knowing how to problem solve, knowing a little bit about a lot of things like Batman, in addition to knowing a whole lot about one thing in terms of technical knowledge. So I posit to you that you want to get T-shaped while you're here at Berry. And the great news is, by design, Berry is going to make you T-shaped. Unless you're a wallflower and just kind of doing the very minimum in life, you should come out of here after 4 years looking pretty T-shaped. And what does that mean? You're going to have depth of knowledge in your major, that up and down piece. You're going to know a whole lot about your particular area of knowledge, your major. But what's going to set you apart is the breadth, right? Remember that philosophy minor who went to the job fair and got the job? He had a whole lot of breadth to him, not just knowing business. He knew business and a whole lot of other things. So that breadth is going to look like a lot of different things. So you're going to get breadth you're going to be well-rounded. You're going to get that breadth of education from your foundations curriculum, from high-impact practices. I'm going to talk about those in just a little bit. I call them HIPs. From co-curricular experiences, right? From being in clubs, being in organizations, being in leadership positions, having done an internship, studying abroad, having a job on campus. These are all things that are filling out that horizontal piece of your T. So don't neglect them, appreciate them. They are going to make a difference. They are going to set you apart when the time comes. Okay, so liberal arts. Liberal arts. So over the years, I have found that there's a lot of misunderstandings about liberal arts. There's a lot of folks who not quite sure what it means. So let me take a little moment to dispel some of the myths and give you some tools to fully understand what you're experiencing. Because here at Berry, you are having an education that's rooted in the liberal arts. Now, liberal arts has nothing to do with your political persuasion. It has nothing to do with being liberal. Secondly, it has nothing to do with being an artist, right? It has nothing to do with your artistic abilities. The word liberal comes from, this is one time I'm going to use Latin today, from libertas, right? Where we get the English words liberate and liberty. It means freedom. So a liberal arts education, I think we need to rebrand it. I think we need to go to Madison Avenue and do a whole different kind of marketing campaign. Let's call it freedom education or liberation education. It's an education for free-minded people, for liberated people, for people who participate in a democracy. And those of you who like cooking shows, right, like Paula Deen, like when she says, apply butter liberally, she's talking, put a lot of butter on it, right? Base that thing, put a lot of juice and salt and seasonings liberally, generously base that turkey before you put it in the oven, right? So your liberal arts education, you're going to be generously educated. You're going to be broadly educated for a meaningful life beyond graduation. So a couple things about liberal arts, right? Number one, in the 21st century, people need liberal arts skills. So here's a couple of quotes, right? First of all, from Thomas Friedman, who wrote the book The World is Flat. And he says it's an imperative for innovation in a global economy, right? Encouraging young people early to think horizontally and connect disparate dots has to be a priority because this is where and how innovation happens. And first, you need dots to connect, and that means a liberal arts education. Secondly, Stephen Sadove, former chairman and CEO of Saks, says, successful managers communicate well. They build relationships and create an environment where employees can do their best work. In other words, they practice the skills most closely associated with the liberal arts education. So it's not just me, the Dean of Humanities and Liberal Arts, Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences, the Dean of Liberal Arts, telling you this. These are respected people saying, when you go out into the work world, liberal arts skills are needed for the 21st century. Even our fine men and women in the services say that I think that liberal arts is an important way to approach their education, right? So our fine military academies, West Point, the Air Force Academy, and the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, they are all liberal arts institutions as well. So why would you think that the future leaders of our military need to have this kind of a liberal arts education? So at West Point, all students must take English literature, history, philosophy, and political science. At the Air Force Academy, they do exercises in interdisciplinary groups pairing engineers with history and legal majors. And the U.S. Naval Academy is the #9 best liberal arts college in the United States, ahead of places like Vassar, Harvey Mudd, and Smith. So Annapolis, West Point, and Air Force Academy, they are all having that same kind of liberal arts education that you're having too. And our military leaders are saying, these are the kinds of attributes and skills we want the leaders in our armed forces to have. So the question that Lieutenant General William James Lennox asks, why in the age of increasingly technical and complex warfare would America's future combat leaders spend 16 weeks studying the likes of simile, irony, rhyme, and meter? Why do soldiers and future generals need to study poetry? Those who can't communicate can't lead. Poetry, because it describes reality with force and concision, provides an essential tool for effective communication. So there you have it. Drop the mic. Our men and women in the armed services says you need a liberal arts education too. So did Thomas Jefferson. And many of our founding fathers believed that the future of our democracy requires really well-educated people, broadly educated people. So you all who are registered to vote or eligible to vote, we want to make sure that you know what you're doing when you pull the lever, right? If we are going to give the sacred trust of voting rights to people, we hope that when they go into the ballot box, they are informed citizens. And Jefferson believed this when he founded the University of Virginia. He wanted to make sure that the future leaders of America had a broad and deep education, right? And he said the cornerstone of a democracy rests on the foundation of an educated electorate. If you don't like UVA, UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, founded by Benjamin Franklin. He decided as well to adopt a different kind of model of higher ed. They did not want to import the European model, which at the time was narrow, specialized education in a particular field, and that's it. That was the European model. Jefferson and Franklin, when they founded their respective universities, wanted and believed that democracy needed a different style of education. So liberal arts education is very American, right, at its core. It's American education. It's freedom education. And that's the education that you're getting here at Berry. The last thing I want to say about liberal arts is I like to think about liberal arts as liberation. So take a look at this image and think for a moment, what's happening? What's the message here in this little cartoon? Think to yourselves. We have a young man reading a book. We have a young person reading a book going down an escalator. And on the other side of the escalator, we have these faceless, anonymous drones with their faces in their phones. A liberal arts education is an empowering education. It's going to give you the skills to sift through a whole lot of muck that's being fed to us every day on our phones, on our laptops, on our screens. A liberal arts education is going to help you discern what's truth, what's fiction, who's manipulating me, who's telling me what to think. A liberally educated person, a person with a liberal arts education does not get the wool pulled over their eyes. They know how to think critically and think for themselves. And for me, this type of knowledge, it's power. It's power, students. It's power. So think about that. When you're in your general education classes, you are being empowered to think for yourselves and to live a life of consequence and to not have other people tell you what you should and should not be thinking. And that way, when you go into the ballot box, you can make your own decisions. So to sum it up, in terms of liberal arts, right? Foundations matter. Your foundations education does matter. It's going to turn you into Mr. T. It's going to turn you into Batman. It's going to make you echo the wishes of Jefferson and Franklin. You're going to be set up for a career of success, and you're going to live a life of meaning. So your foundations do matter. So the next time you're in one of those classes, this never happens at the end of the class, but at the beginning of the class, you're like, what am I doing in this foundations class? Why am I here? I got to check off this box. I got to get through it. Sure, whatever. This is an opportunity for you to deepen and broaden your minds and to be a liberally educated, a liberation-educated student. Amen to that. All right, so going back to our map, so we talked about foundations, we talked about our major, and I want to talk a little bit about electives before bringing us to a close tonight. So my plea to you, my desire for you, is that you engage in what we call these high-impact practices. A lot of research in higher ed has been done on this, and the conclusion is there are certain kinds of activities, certain types of learning experiences, they make a high impact, right? They make a difference in students' lives. They help you learn better, and they propel you to better things beyond graduation. So things like first-year seminars, BCC, what up BCC? First-year seminars and first-year experiences are one of these high-impact practices. Common intellectual experiences, learning communities, writing intensive courses, collaborative assignments and projects, research as an undergraduate, diversity learning, global learning, study abroad, service learning, community-based learning, internships, capstones, and special projects, right? These are all things that are baked into a Barry education. And boy, you all are lucky, right? You all are lucky. Not everyone has the kind of access to high-impact practices that you do. There's a privilege of being here at Barry that you can go down this list and you'll be able to plug into one of these really easily, right? Because you're at a place like Barry. So my exhortation to you, my wish for you, is that you fill out that third of your pie that's not foundations, it's not your major, with some of these high-impact practices. Don't freak out. You don't have to do all of these, right? If you do one or two or three of them, they're going to make a difference in your learning, and they're going to make a difference in your lives. So my advice to you, get out, get to work, and get involved. Barry's a very comfortable place. I've been here a year and a half, and I see the bubble. It's a cozy place. It's a nice place. Sometimes you don't want to leave the bubble. But so much learning happens when you leave it. So get out, study abroad. And if you can't study abroad, explore beyond campus. You know, look at getting a job off campus. Look at an internship. Look at when you go home for the summer, exploring other opportunities. Work matters as well. So employers, what they're looking for when they're hiring folks, these things overlay with the high-impact practices, right? They're looking for students who have an internship. 94% of employers are looking for this. 83% are looking for community projects with people from diverse backgrounds. 81% looking for students with collaborative research with peers. Service learning, advanced senior thesis, multiple courses with significant writing. Employers want this stuff, right? And the good news for you all is it's here. It's here in front of you at Barry, right? So get involved, get to work, and get out, right? And engage in these high-impact practices because they're going to make a difference. Okay. Let me talk about the Big Six. Big Six is not a football conference, right? It's a way of doing higher education that will make a difference in students' lives in the future. So look at these, right, these 6 points, and ask yourself, have I had one of these yet? Has one of my professors cared about me as a person? Have I had at least one professor who made me excited about learning? At Barry, have I had a mentor who encouraged me to pursue my goals and dreams? At Barry, have I had an internship or a job that allowed me to apply what I'm learning in the classroom with what's happening in the work world? While at Barry, did I work on a project that took a semester or more to complete? And then while I was at Barry, was I extremely active in extracurricular activities and organizations? So there was a research study done by Gallup and Purdue a number of years back, and they asked successful, well-adapted, happy folks in life, they asked them, what was your college experience like? And did you have one of these Big Six experiences? And they found that people who had at least one Big Six experience was more likely than their peers to be living a successful, happy life. And if you have more than one Big Six, the likelihood of you being according to the survey, well prepared for life after college grew exponentially, right? So as you're navigating your education, think about these big six, right? Think about doing a research project that's going to take a semester or longer. Think about that high-intensity writing class that you're in. Think about forging relationships with your faculty. And man, here at Barry, you have access to your faculty. You can have those relationships if you put yourself out there, right? And that's going to make a difference in your lives after graduation. So mindful of the clock, and I want to make sure that we have time for any questions or comments or discussion. I want to leave you with kind of a summary, right, of what the things that we discussed this evening, right? I want you to try to understand the why of what you're doing in college, and not just go through the motions. You're here at college not by inertia. You're here for a reason. And that's going to make a difference for you if you understand what's happening and why you're going through this particular educational experience, why you're on this journey, and what it all means. Don't go through the motions blindly. Don't go through the motions with your face in the phone. Be aware of what's happening and why you are learning what you are. Secondly, don't stress too much about the major. Now, next week we have a whole week of activities and stuff to talk about majors, to help you discern, to help you understand and come to a decision about majors. But don't worry about if you got it wrong, right? Don't worry about making a mistake. Your major won't be a mistake, right? Your major will be a pathway, and you will be able to move in lots of different directions, even if you picked a major that you don't really like in 20 years, right? Your career will take you in a different direction. So don't stress too much about it. Listen to your intuition, listen to your passions, listen to your heart, as well as think about the kind of life that you want to have after. Remember that foundations matter, right? I've heard so much grumbling, not just here, but at other institutions, right? About general education. Man, I got to take these classes. I don't want to be in the Spanish class. Well, I got to take Spanish. This is just drag. Just give me my major. Believe it or not, your foundations classes, maybe not at the moment, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, you're going to look back longingly at your foundations classes. You're going to be the more interesting person at a cocktail party because you took some really cool foundations classes. I think about my general education classes all the time, and I'm 48 years old. I still think about a theology class that I took. I think about an economics class that I took. I think about an art class that I took. These are things that had an impact on me beyond my career, beyond my major, beyond my grad school studies, but those were things that made me more well-rounded and more interested in life. So appreciate your foundations because they do matter. Carefully construct the other 2/3 of your academic experience. Remember, it's more than just a major. You got a pie, it's got 3 parts to it. Make sure that you're paying attention to all three parts of that pie. Get in T-shape, get hip, get out, get to work, get involved, and be Big 6. So those are my thoughts for you all tonight. I appreciate your attention, and I am happy to answer any all questions about the meaning of life, the meaning of majors, what you all want to do in the future, and thank you again.